One of the most peculiar things that have happened in the time since Pope Leo was named Pope on the 8th of May, 2025, was the persistence of Cardinal Victor Manuel Fernandez. Pope Leo has kept most of Francis's senior curial officials. A few have since retired or been replaced, but he's kept most of them around, and especially the most controversial ones. We generally expect to see Cardinal Roach go away soon because he has hit the age of retirement where he could be easily replaced by somebody. And he is often thought of as being one of the least competent ones there. But Fernandez persists. And it is one of those things that even the conservative commentators who demand that you believe that Cardinal Prevost, now Pope Leo, is definitely not a Francis II type figure, even though I maintain more and more that he is, just with better manners and better disposition and a better outward appearance. But in all fundamentals, he is still very Francis like. I tend to disagree with the more conservative people, whom I have respect for, that he is in any way materially different. But even they notice that it's strange that Fernandez is around. And Fernandez addressed a group a couple days ago in Rome where he basically said that people are too dim-witted to be able to understand theology. His theology is too highbrow for people to understand, and that people who are, quote, dissenting from it should really stop. This is getting to them. Every little thing, every blog out there, little podcast, whatever it is, and of course, all of those really do help underscore to bishops who are far more important in this that there is support from the laity in defending actual Catholic beliefs. It shows them there is support for this, support for their position, and helps to get those bishops to ask questions publicly. And so we go here to the reporting on this, and we're going to start from a Catholic news website that is out of Europe that is very much like a European equivalent of the National Catholic Reporter. And I like to use these kind of heterodox Catholic news sites because they will give you things unfiltered. They will assume their target audience are like-minded modernist Catholics who they can say unfiltered things to. So we go here to Solare Non Possum. For this headline, Cardinal Fernandez, on any blog, people condemn as though they were speaking ex cathedra. We must recover the sound realism of the great mystics. The sound realism of the great mystics he wants to recover is people's willingness to just shut up and obey. Just accept the new religion, ladies and gentlemen. That is what he wants. The new synodal church with its new theology that goes and, quote, completes the work of Vatican II, to paraphrase what all of these modernists in Rome have said. He wants people to shut up and obey. The problem is this. Catholic theology at its most basic level is not that hard to understand for a reasonably literate layperson. If you were in the habit of reading books that required some thought, you could probably handle reading most theology. I'm not talking Aquinas's Summa. That can be a little advanced for most people, but a lot of the writings of saints and popes can be easily engaged with by someone who actually has a habit of reading. And you don't need to be a bearer of a PhD in some field or another to understand what is going on. And this is his kind of main point. People are too dumb to understand his great, magnificent thinking. Instead, they should just shut up and obey. And I want you to remember something. There's been talk from Rome for the past mostly a decade now of trying to do something about controlling the Catholic blogosphere and the podcasters and all the rest of it. We already know, they have confirmed this, that they have people in Rome who watch and read blogs and podcasts and all the rest of it. So I always half jokingly say, please say a prayer for whatever priest or seminarian or layperson in Rome has the unfortunate duty of watching everything I do on this channel. Please say a prayer for them. And let's go find out from the perspective of the biggest supporters of everything heterodox out of Rome and of Fernandez, what it is Fernandez means by this in his own words. However, I would be remiss if I didn't fix that. So here we go. This morning, Cardinal Victor Manuel Fernandez, prefect of the Dicastery for the Doctrine of the Faith, opened a plenary session with a reflection that was both spiritual and methodological, a concrete reminder of how the Church thinks, discerns, and speaks with authority. The plenary begins today. Will conclude on the 29th of January and brings together around 70 participants. The prefect's starting point was not a technical topic, but an inner stance: intellectual humility. Fernandez said that in recent times, in prayer, he has felt a strong call to this posture, invoking the motto, Ubi humilitas ibi sapientia. From there came his practical direction: entered the shared work without the presumption of possessing reality, and without confusing the ability to think with the claim to exhaust whatever one is thinking about. In other words, you don't come in thinking you know the truth. And just because you might be reasonably literate does not mean that you understand everything. That's an interesting statement to make. I claim to possess the truth. If you are a Catholic who affirms what the Church had always said on taught on every single thing until like the late 1960s, then guess what? You affirm the truth. You believe you possess the truth. After all, Jesus Christ did say the Catholic Church would be guided in all truth by the Holy Spirit. So yes, we have a presumption of reality here. At the center of the text, the prefect set a clear distinction. God has given the human being a faculty of thought with universal reach. Quoting him directly, one can think the world, history, origins. One can even think God. Yet this openness does not make the mind capable of total comprehension. Fernandez puts it plainly. This universal capacity of thought does not mean that human persons have an ability for exhaustiveness, for an integral perception of reality. And he adds, it is impossible for a human mind to be aware of reality in its totality and in every aspect. This is possible only for God. Now, what you're seeing here, you might think, well, that's not a problem. That's obviously true. The way the modernists sell you on their errors is to tell you make truth claims, and then to base their errors on their truth claims. So yes, it is only possible for God to know everything. Obviously true. But it's from there that they give you the errors. From that premise follows the move that holds the entire reflection together: the impossibility of understanding, quote unquote, integrally, even what appears small and self-contained, because every fragment becomes clear only within the whole. Fernandez insists, quote, we cannot have an integral understanding even of a small part of this world, because that part can be fully understood only in the light of totality in which it is integrated. Everything is connected. The conclusion is a sober acknowledgement. We are incapable of interpreting all the meanings and nuances of reality, of a person, of a historical moment, of truth, of a truth, whatever that means. To make the point more concrete, Fernandez turns to Aquinas. The inexhaustible richness of God is expressed more fittingly through the richness of the whole, and through the variety willed by the intention of the first agent, such that what is lacking in each thing for representing divine goodness is supplied by other things. The decisive line follows. God's goodness cannot be adequately represented by a single creature. Along the same lines, he places a citation for Pope Francis on the need to, quote, grasp the variety of things in their multiple relationships, and to contemplate each creature within the whole of God's plan. And he goes on to invoke St. John of the Cross, and talks about how, well, the danger this comes from. The message is that reality, and even more so the mystery of God, cannot be reduced to quick schemes or brisk certainties. Against this background, Fernandez warns that progress in science and technology does not remove our limits. It makes it more necessary to keep them in view. Again, that's true. The more science and technology advance, the more we must keep that awareness of limits alive, he said, distancing himself from the terrible deception of feeling secure and of justifying, with fallacious reasoning, choices, and violence. And here's where he throws the Church under the bus. In his address, he links this dynamic to historical contemporary examples. The excesses of the Inquisition. You know what the excesses of the Inquisition were? The excesses of the Inquisition were the secular authorities doing such heinous evil things, often in the name of the Church, that it drove some people who were facing legal questions, courts and court things, to the arms of the Inquisition, because the men in most places who ran the Inquisition knew very well that when they stood before God, they'd have to give an account of what they did in the Inquisition. And so these men believed they would get a fairer shake out of the Inquisition. To blame the Inquisition for a lot of the evils of the Middle Ages is very much a line right out of the playbook of Martin Luther. He calls the world wars, the event, we'll say, of World War II, and the current things going on in the Holy Land, to show how argument can become an alibi when it loses hold of truth. The prefect then returns to ordinary life. The same can happen in the life of all of us, because we repeat the deception by living too sure of what we know. I'm very sure in what we know. I'm very sure that the Catholic faith, as taught by the Church, guided by the Holy Spirit, until modernists got some wacky ideas in their heads 60 years ago, was the surest way to heaven. I hope you share that with me. There's some observations about this that are now making the rounds. We'll go first to the Radical Fidelity blog on Substack under the headline, Fernandez gaslights critics of the synodal train wreck in meditation riddled with agnostic relativism. The meditation undermined Catholic doctrine of truth as usual, reason as usual, and authority as usual, while recasting dissent as intellectual arrogance. Many things that the institution claiming to be the Catholic Church teaches today are different than what the Church taught before 60 years ago. Freedom of religion is the number one obvious thing. In the last decade, we've seen changing in teachings from what was taught before that till now. Fiducia supplicans and Amoris Laetitia are the obvious choices there. We're going to skip down to past most of the we'll call it context here, to this. Under the heading of the Cardinal wants you to doubt whether you, mere mortal, can know reality. The meditation repeatedly insists that human beings cannot have a comprehensive understanding of even a small part of this world, because everything can only be understood in light of the whole. While this is true in a limited and a logical sense, Fernandez stretches, surprise, surprise, this principle beyond Catholic teaching, beyond the bounds of intellectual decency. Classical Catholic theology, especially as articulated by Thomas Aquinas, has never taught that partial knowledge is therefore unreliable or incapable of truth. On the contrary, Aquinas insists that while we cannot know exhaustively, we can know truly. Truth is not synonymous with total comprehension. If it were, no dogma could ever be definitively articulated, no doctrine ever settled, and no heresy ever condemned. And that is key to understanding Fernandez and really what's going on now. Case in point, the Synod of Synodality has these working groups going on. Yeah, it's still going on, like still. And a couple of months ago, they issued a document that the secular media jumped on, saying the Catholic Church definitively says no to women deacons and women's ordination. That's not what that document said. What the document said is, they looked at historical documents, archaeological evidence, and all the rest of it, and could find no basis for there ever having been ordained women. They could find no basis in theology for ordaining women. That sounds great. But then they said we're leaving the subject open to further study, because many elements within the modernist new synodal church hierarchy believe that if they just keep looking, they'll eventually find something that justifies ordained deaconesses. That is what we're talking about. This is why that document was never backed by an anathema. Pope Leo himself could do what John Paul II did not do. See, John Paul II issued a document closing the issue, but he did not attach an anathema to it, because in the post-conciliar church, the church, for whatever reason, does not believe in anathemas. JP2 didn't do that. Leo could, and it would go a long way to restoring trust with him by simply saying, this issue is closed forever. Whoever continues to pursue the ordination of women, let him be anathema. He could do that. It would close the issue. An anathema means excommunication. Anathema means you bear a curse. It is the most powerful invocation of papal infallibility. But they can't, because if it were, no dogma could ever be definitively articulated, no doctrine ever settled, and no heresy ever condemned. That is the core of modernism. These questions remain open forever until they get the answer they like. The Cardinal's formulation shifts the discussion from epistemic humility, we do not know everything, to epistemic insecurity, we cannot reliably know anything in itself. This move places him uncomfortably close to a form of modern skepticism foreign to Catholic tradition, but common in postmodern, meaning whatever's being taught now, philosophy in colleges. And safe to say, that was the devilish plan. The church has always rejected this move. Vatican I solemnly taught that human reason can know truth with certainty, including truths about God, though imperfectly. To imply otherwise is to erode the metaphysical realism upon which Catholic doctrine rests. The second major claim, that we must understand reality primarily by listening to others and embracing multiple perspectives, sounds benign and even charitable, But beneath the way it is framed lies a more sinister strategy. Fernandez does not merely say that others can help refine our understanding. He implies that truth itself is constituted through a plurality of perspectives, such that no one possesses the whole truth. And we'll pause here again. Pope St. Pius X, in his encyclical Pascendi, which defined and condemned the heresy of modernism, says that the modernist theology, their entire claim about God, comes through this process. That we cannot know the truth of God and religion without sharing our perspectives and interior feelings about things. And only through then can we come to know the truth. That's a form of religious relativism. It's condemned. It's a formal heresy that Pius XII tried to suppress. And he did for a time. He drove the modernists underground. But now they are back and running everything in the church. This formulation, cited approvingly from Leo XIV, is ambiguous at best and misleading at worst. It is also the entire framework upon which the synodal religion is built. You shall know the truth and what is right and wrong by listening, conversing, discerning, and journeying. In other words, he, Fernandez, wants Catholics to doubt and reject both the church's gift of ultimate truth and the individual gift of reason received from God. Well, here's what it's really about. As the author says, this is really about a subtle gaslighting of critics. The most revealing and troubling moment comes when Cardinal Fernandez criticizes those who on any blog express opinions condemn as a speaking ex cathedra. This remark is not accidental, but functions rhetorically to delegitimize critics of doctrinal confusion by portraying them as arrogant, simplistic, and technologically empowered amateurs. The irony is striking. The very officials who now accuse critics of overconfidence are the same ones issuing ambiguous documents, pastoral clarifications, and disciplinary actions that profoundly affect the life of the synodal church, often without the clarity traditionally expected of doctrinal authority. When ordinary Catholics appeal to past magisterial teaching, clear definitions, and perennial doctrine, they're not playing Pope. They're doing precisely what Catholic tradition has always encouraged, measuring novelty against what has always been believed everywhere and by all. To frame such fidelity's epistemic arrogance is a classic form of gaslighting. First, deny the clarity of what was once clear. Second, insist that certainty itself is dangerous. Third, portray those who remember as the real problem. The plan, the game, is all about moral relativism, religious theological relativism, and to push back on those of us who say, look, the church gave us a roadmap to salvation. Follow the church's teachings, which were always clear and fairly simply expressed. You can get much more complicated with them if you need to, hence why you have the likes of Aquinas and Bellarmine and the rest. But on the things that matter most in your day-to-day life, the church's teachings are pretty simple. You can know with certainty the truth. Because Jesus Christ is the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father except through him. And he gave us the Paraclete to guide the church's leadership in all truth. Until they rejected it for comfort in the 60s. Case in point, Pope Leo XIV recently addressed an ecumenical group. And he has really taken on what Pope Francis was doing with the ecumenical meetings, and really what their predecessors did. This is one of the main problems with Vatican II, the post-conciliar era, that all the popes, even the good ones after Vatican II, were really playing fast and loose with ecumenical dialogue in such a way that the behaviors of the popes after Vatican II would not have been recognizable as Catholic by the church leadership and the great saints and doctors of the church up to the council. It would not have been recognized as such. Their dialoguing with break-off groups, various Protestant groups, would not have been recognized as Catholic because they were going with more than just charitably discussing things with them. They were not trying to clear up misconceptions about what the church teaches in an effort to bring people back into the Catholic Church. They were going above and beyond that, dialoguing in friendship with no clear purpose. And now Leo made an astonishing statement that fits right in line with all the nonsense coming from Cardinal Fernandez and everybody else recently. Headline: Pope Leo says different Christian faiths are already one. Pope Leo's claim directly contradicts Catholic teaching that Christian unity is grounded in shared faith, the sacraments, and governance. Yes, there's a classic claim. We're united in baptism. We're united by the creed. Did you know many Protestant groups now reject the creed? They overtly say creeds are too churchy because there is a claim by Protestant groups that is growing in popularity, and that is that Jesus didn't even found a church. He founded a relationship. Just me and Jesus. It's a claim based on the idea that like the Bible fell from the sky or something, and that you should worship the Bible because according to some of them, Jesus and the Bible are literally the same thing. If that sounds like nonsense to you, it should. It shows you that people do not understand that the Bible was not actually written in English, that it was written in Greek and Hebrew, and the word have a very much more complicated philosophical and theological meaning than we're used to hearing today. Point being, we're not united in faith much about anything aside from we believe Jesus Christ is God. But there are now Christian groups who deny the Trinity. So again, what are we united in? From the article, Pope Leo XIV concluded the week of prayer for Christian unity by declaring that different Christian faiths are already one. We are one. We already are. Let us recognize it, experience it, and make it visible, Leo said in his Sunday homily on the feast of the conversion of St. Paul to Basilica of St. Paul outside the walls in Rome. As Vatican News put it, he stressed how different Christian religions share the same faith. His remarks were addressed to clergymen of schismatic and heretical churches, including the Ecumenical Patriarch of Constantinople, the Armenian Apostolic Church, and the Anglican Communion. Leo's claim directly contradicts Catholic teaching, as laid out in the Catechism of St. Pius X, according to the which the Church is united by the same faith, same worship, same law, and the participation of the same sacraments under the same visible head, the Roman Pontiff. That, ladies and gentlemen, is Catholicism 101 on the unity of the Church. Therefore, schismatic churches that reject the authority of the Pope, such as Eastern Orthodox churches and heretical groups such as the Anglican Communion, cannot be said to be unified or one with the Catholic Church. The Catechism of the Council of Trent affirms, quote, "It is the unanimous teaching of the Fathers," which means you have to believe it. The unanimous teaching of the Fathers is something you must believe as a Catholic, that this visible head is necessary to establish and preserve unity in the Church. Likewise, in the encyclical Satis Cognitum, promulgated on June 29, 1896 by Leo XIII, taught that Christian unity is grounded in shared faith, the sacraments, and governance. The document explicitly rejected the idea of an invisible or merely spiritual church and affirmed that full unity requires adherence to the authority established by Christ in the Catholic Church. In his Sunday homily, Leo XIV also invoked Pope Francis's claim that the synodal path of the Catholic Church, quote, is and must be ecumenical, just as the ecumenical journey is synodal. As we look forward to the 2000th anniversary of the Passion, Death, and Resurrection of the Lord Jesus in 2033, let us commit ourselves to further developing ecumenical synodal practices and to sharing with one another who we are, what we do, and what we teach, Leo said. And there it is again, the sharing with one another stuff that goes from back to Pascendi by Pius X. The very definition, the document that gives us the very definition of what modernism is, that the truth is discernible through sharing our interior experiences of theology, which is the only way to know the truth about God. Condemned by Pius X. Donna became a channel member. Do appreciate it. Just a reminder for those of you who are channel members, which you can become one through the subscribe plus button below if you're watching this on YouTube. You get a free super chat once a month on the channel you're a member of. Use it. You're paying for it, so please use it. This is an incredible statement by Pope Leo, and it's a move towards according to some, it is a move towards the establishment of one religion for everyone in the world. There already is one for that. One ordained by God. That would be the Catholic faith. There's a competing one to it also, right from the bowels of hell. That would be the followers of the crescent moon and its false prophet. Those are your options that exist. But there's also a third one, the one of the Antichrist. And I'm not saying that Pope Leo is the false prophet. He's certainly not the Antichrist, but he's not the false. And I don't think he's the false prophet. But these guys are making the job that he will do much easier when he arrives on the scene. But the headline here, this is sort of just an excerpt that Complicit Clergy is publishing here from the Radical Fidelity article. This is the key part of it. The headline is Synodal Church Advances Toward the Religion for One World. The details here. Leo XIV is not only increasing and ferociously beating the drums for so-called Christian unity, but now appears to be setting a deadline for his ecumenical impurity project, a la the UN's program for the end of the decade. Christian unity is merely the last inconvenience the synodalists need to remove in order to fulfill their larger dream of religious unity. After all, a religion for the whole world would be farcical if the fragmented Christian groups cannot even get their own scheming in lockstep. On the 25th of January, at the conclusion of the Week of Prayer for Christian Unity, Leo XIV delivered a homily that explicitly reiterated the Vatican's emphasis on ecumenical unity through a synodal path. He declared that the synodal path of the Catholic Church is and must be ecumenical, just as the ecumenical path is synodal, and appealed to Christians of other communions to experience and manifest unity as a foretaste of Christ's mission. If the perennial Catholic faith matters to you at all, we know it does not to the infestation in the Vatican, then Catholics still associating with the Catholic synodal hybrid religion should have grave theological concerns about the practical dangers of merging synodality and ecumenism in the manner Prevost proposes. By no means am I encouraging obstructionism to the reunification of Christendom. However, such unity must always and only take place in fidelity to the Church's doctrinal integrity, her teaching on the nature of the Church, and the absolute necessity of safeguarding authentic Catholic unity from dilution or confusion. In other words, unity around Catholic truth, or no unity at all. Zero compromises can be made in the pursuit of this ideal. Either heretical or schismatic groups return to the one true faith, or they remain scattered on the road to perdition. But as we know, the synodal spawn occupying Rome are willing to sell their own mothers to achieve the goal of false ecumenism. A recent example of this moral and doctrinal giveaway was Leo XIV's omission of the Filioque during the recitation of the Creed with the Orthodox Patriarch. And I've seen some Catholics in trying to give him the benefit of the doubt, downplaying the severity of that. The popes have defended the Filioque since the 10th century. And here he gave it away. Truly amazing. Got a WM review here. For the headline, Pope Leo, we are one. We already are. Correct, but not as intended. Because there's, of course, truth, right? Unity and baptism. That's part of unity. But it was the post-conciliar popes, and building on the sort of the culture shock of the early 20th century after 2 world wars, that the Vatican started playing a little fast and loose with this concept. Even if you go back to the 19th century and the 18th century, and you saw how the Catholic Church treated those breakaway groups, you'd find things are very, very different now, unrecognizably so than they were beforehand. The sermon invoked Francis's claim that the Catholic Church's synodal path is and must be ecumenical, just as the ecumenical journey is synodal. For those hoping he'll get rid of synodality, keep waiting. Leo urged Christians to develop ecumenical synodal practices and share who we are, what we do, and what we teach, as they look toward the 2000th anniversary of Christ's passion, death, and resurrection. He also praised last year's commemoration of the 1700th anniversary of the Council of Nicaea in Turkey, hosted by Ecumenical Patriarch Bartholomew. Reciting the Nicene Creed together in the very place it was formulated was a profound and unforgettable testimony to our unity in Christ, he said, expressing gratitude that so many Christian traditions were represented. The pontiff extended greetings to Cardinal Kurt Koch, the grand architect of the plan for synodal pope of a synodal church. If you don't know what that's about, last year, I think it was, I covered here on this channel a document issued by the Vatican it was definitely a feeler document, a proposal written by Cardinal Kurt Koch that said that the papacy should be stripped down of its powers, made it more synodal and elevating the bishops even higher. Put in the context of the Synod on Synodality, was a terrifying document because you saw the annihilation of hierarchical authority in the church. 2 doctrinal points arose from this sermon, both of which we shall address. The claim that Catholics are already one with adherents of heretical and schismatic groups, and 2, the claim that Catholics share the same faith with such persons. We don't. You cannot share the same faith with people who think you can put Jesus in a binding contract through a prayer that will guarantee your salvation. Weirdly American idea, but you can't. There is no unity in that. And frankly, we've already outlined what the unity of the church is. Aside from baptism and the creed, it's also submission to the authority of Rome and its perennial teachings, and to the unity in the sacraments. This is why ecumenical dialogue with the Eastern Orthodox towards unity is a much more valid project than with those who deny all of those things. The issues with the Orthodox are on a few matters of theology, because yes, there are heresies there, but also it's about just authority, the nature of Roman authority. you can have a much more fruitful dialogue with them, of course, ignoring for the moment the Orthodox concerns about the new Mass itself, synodality, Vatican II, all these other things. But there's much more to work with there because there's so much more unity on sacramental theology and everything else than there are in groups who kind of make up Christianity as they go along. Here are his claims. 1, the claim that Catholics already won with the adherence of heretical and schismatic groups. The church doesn't teach that we already won, but we here applies not to a ragtag body of men who claim to be Christians, but to the Catholic Church. She also teaches that Christ's prayer before his passion has already been fulfilled in the unity of the church in her worship, government, and faith. In order to address this point, I will be drawing on an earlier article explaining Louis Cardinal Bilot's ecclesiology and explaining the church's unity. It goes into the our Lord's Prayer in the Gospel of John that all may be one. Cardinal Bilot writes the following. It is certain that this prayer, which expresses the absolute will of Christ, had to be fulfilled infallibly on all points. Christ was able to address certain requests to his Father in an absolute manner, in the sense that he requests concern precisely the real obtaining of an end and not only the obtaining of means, the use of which is left to human freedom, which can always fail. This request of Christ could not be deprived of its effect, and that it must therefore be considered as a law, establishing the necessary properties of which the true church would inevitably be endowed. As far as we know, no one has ever denied this point. And those universal law would be the law of the church, as well as the sacraments and the rest of it. This is an interesting article that I think people should go over maybe in more detail on your own. I'll post the link later today at the Anthony Stine Substack. Yes, the WM review is written by Sedevacantists. No, I'm not a Sedevacantist. No, I don't have an issue with Sedevacantists. I disagree about Sedevacantism, but their teaching there is absolutely correct in that article. Very good actual Substack. I do recommend following it if you can actually handle reading things written from a slightly different perspective than your own. But there's a question here. All this rides on a question. And the question that is at the core of this, one that's been being asked now by Catholics for the last about almost 9 months now, and that is Pope Leo a change of voice or a change of course? A change of voice is really what this appears to be. Yes, he is correcting some things Francis did that were overreaches, but I'll remind you, Bergoglians themselves would point out very cautiously under Francis that there were things that he did that they found that they did not like. And I don't mean his unwillingness to just say yes to ordaining women, or the fact that he would sometimes say some very, very great sounding things, never backed by action, about the sacrifice to Moloch and the weirdly large number of James Martin types in the hierarchy and all the rest. He'd occasionally say some really great things about that. Not that stuff. They were always upset about his not holding consistories, sometimes playing favorites with some cardinals, giving people who should not have ever been given multiple chances in the hierarchy, multiple chances. There's the Zanquetta case in South America as a perfect example. A recent promotion in Argentina that he had done that Pope Leo just undid of a really corrupt bishop, a whole lot of other things. Pope Leo's undoing a lot of those things, but he's not changing the direction of the church. He might be slowing it down a little bit, but it's the voice has changed. It's not a change of course. And this is what separates the traditionally minded observers from like many of the more just conservative Catholics who do try to sell the idea that Pope Leo is fundamentally different. What has unsettled observers of Pope Leo XIV's early pontificate is not simply the presence of mixed signals, but the way those signals appear to cut in opposite ecclesiological directions at the same time. On the one hand, there are moments of unmistakable clarity, even severity, that read as a quiet but unmistakable rebuke of the governing instincts of Pope Francis. On the other, there is a persistence of appointments, emphases, and symbolic gestures that seem to tether the new pontificate firmly to the very currents that have driven confusion and decline for decades. The question is no longer whether Pope Leo represents continuity or rupture, but whether he is attempting to hold together two visions of the church that are, in truth, increasingly irreconcilable. And I'm not even sure he's trying to hold together two visions of the church that are increasingly irreconcilable. It's full steam ahead. That's what it looks like to me. Our final story for the day, I think, is a perfect example of this. What you're about to see is the story of a bishop who should be punished for breaking virtually all the norms of his own consecration. Case in point. What is the main aim of the girl altar boys and demand for women lectors and women's ordination to the diaconate, which would then lead to women's ordination to the priesthood and, in theory, women's consecration as bishops. Well, the bishops are the end goal. And really, the end goal is once you get a bishop, a female bishop, you can have a female pope, a popette, if you like. That's the end goal. They want to basically have the church admit that it has been wrong this entire time on ordination, because they now point to the Eastern Orthodox as having deaconesses, because there are some of the churches in the Eastern Orthodox that have them now ordained. That story made waves recently. The Anglicans are now led by an archbishop-ette. And so the goal has always been Christ's actual church, the Catholic Church, to embrace the same current, bringing feminist theology into the Catholic Church. And it's always troubling when you see bishops play along with this. Many of them have no qualms whatsoever about just embracing this in small ways, and sometimes not in such small ways. For this, today we go to the life site for this story that should give people pause. The headline: New Vienna Archbishop's consecration mass features women in key roles and altered rituals. Heavily altered liturgical rite visually emphasized a concept of ecclesial authority as emerging from the gathered community rather than the church's established hierarchy. This is the tension between the Catholic Church and the Synodal Church. What is the authority? The Catholic Church's authority comes from Christ through the person of the Pope, guided by the Holy Spirit. And, of course, the bishops, who are apostolic men. All of them are apostolic men. The Synodal Church derives its authority from the consent of the governed. That's what it is. It's a democracy. Not a democracy in, you go into ballots and casting votes, but through process of dialogue and mutual listening and all this other nonsense. The end goal for the synodalist is to have the least worst catechized generations in history being the ones who actually determine what is doctrine and, by extension, dogma, determining who can be priests and bishops. They have said as much at the Synod on Synodality. And here you see a perfect manifestation of this from the article. Josef Grundwindel was ordained Archbishop of Vienna on Saturday in a ceremony at St. Stephen's Cathedral. The rite included notable deviations from the liturgical texts, with an emphasis on layperson involvement, including women-led roles in the ceremony. On January 24th, he was consecrated Archbishop during a solemn Mass in Vienna, after having been appointed by Pope Leo XIV as successor to Cardinal Christoph Schönborn. During the consecration, elements not provided for in the liturgical texts for the ritual were introduced, which appeared to express the modernist vision the new bishop holds regarding certain aspects of Christian life, nature, and the structure of the church. There are at least two elements that diverge from the prescriptions of the Roman Pontifical during the consecration Mass. At the moment of the imposition of the Book of the Gospels over the head of the bishop-elect, the rite, meaning the rules on how this is done, specifies that this action is to be performed by two deacons. In this celebration, however, the Gospel was held by four individuals: one deacon, one priest, and two female assistants. The choice is particularly significant in light of Grundwindel's document, Support for Expanding Ministerial Roles for Women. For several years, he was reported to be in some way associated with Call to Disobedience, a movement of approximately 350 Austrian priests and deacons. The group urged clergy to disregard Vatican directives on sacramental discipline, including admitting to Holy Communion divorced and civilly remarried Catholics, and even non-Catholics and individuals under canonical penalties. The group also promoted self-managed liturgies with expanded lay participation in preaching and Eucharistic celebrations, as well as the introduction of both a married priesthood and women's ordination. Grundwindel's name no longer appears on the movement's official register, and is reported to have distanced himself from it in recent years. No disciplinary measures against members of the group have been announced by the Vatican in recent years. Furthermore, in an interview given on October 5th, 2025, as reported by the website of the Archdiocese of Vienna, Grundwindel stated that mandatory celibacy is not theologically necessary, all the more so since it is regulated only by canon law, has no dogmatic foundation, and does not exist in other Christian churches. Consequently, he said it should not be a requirement for admission to the priesthood. With regard to the female diaconate, he added, the discussion should not be suppressed, in that it would be desirable to include women in the College of Cardinals, and thus in the Pope's most important circle of advisors. If you include women in the College of Cardinals, in theory, one of them could become Pope. Throwing that out there. During the Mass, a second irregularity concerning the handing over the crozier, the pastoral staff of the bishop, symbolizing his episcopal authority. According to the Roman Pontifical, that is the guide for such consecrations, the crozier is to be given directly to the bishop-elect by the consecrating bishop. In Vienna, the crozier was instead passed through several members of the assembly, including laymen, lay women, priests, and deacons, without a clear order, before being handed to a deacon, who then gave it to the consecrating bishop, and finally to the bishop-elect. This altered sequence visually emphasized a concept of ecclesial authority as emerging from the gathered community, i.e., the actual the consent of the governed. Such symbolism responds with ideas promoted for years within reform movements, advocating a decentralized and participatory model of church governance. This, and then the article goes on, point to describe how this is all illegal according to various legal documents of the church, including, Session 7, Canon 11 of the Council of Trent, teachings of popes, and the like. But it points out that Grundvidal was appointed bishop by Pope Leo in October 2025. It's a creation of Pope Leo. That cannot be denied. I'm very curious what you think about all this in the comments. But let me know, really, do you see what I'm trying to point out here? That this is all connected. It's all connected to synodality. They will take the church and remake it in the image of the modern world's call for essentially managed democracy. The laymen who are always appointed to these positions of authority in the synodal church are handpicked by bishops. It is a tacit, if not explicit, denial of the hierarchical nature of the church as founded by Christ. And yet here we are watching, in this case, a cardinal, or an archbishop who will be named a cardinal. Vienna is historically one of the sees that is always attached to a cardinal, being or consecrated with the participation of lay people, lay men and lay women. When it's done by bishops, he's supposed to be consecrated as bishops by other bishops. That's how it works. And now they have laymen involved in the process. This isn't Catholicism. I don't know what it is, but it's something else. They have broken away from the unity of belief, from what the church has always taught, what our ancestors have always believed and always done. Why? Who knows? I'm very curious what you think of all this, so let me know in the comments, please. Hit like and subscribe if you haven't. It does help. Sharing this on social media helps too. Daily asks the question, did you see that the Archbishop of Cologne said that he will not be taking part in the conference on synodality in Germany? I think I saw that in passing. There are a handful of good bishops and definitely some good priests in Germany who are actively resisting this stuff. And part of their resistance is just not participating anymore. They're done because the outcomes have been decided already. But again, let me know what you think about all this in the comments, please. Hey, like and subscribe if you haven't. It certainly does help. Sharing this on social media helps as well. If you've ever thought about supporting the work we do here at Return to Tradition, Patreon, Subscribestar, all that kind of thing. It does help keep these daily messages coming and is greatly appreciated. Please pray for the church and everybody who spoke about negatively today. I'm Anthony Stine. Ave Maria.